I told my wife the other day, I said, if I was able to get into a time machine and go back 25 years, and somebody said, hey, you can take one or two things with you, I think I would take a book of box scores, because I think you could do pretty well with it, and then I would take this book. I really believe what Greg has in this book is incredible. You guys know we've got a couple of icons at this show, and I would argue if you don't believe this guy's going to be one, watch this guy over the next couple years. This is special stuff. These are a couple of things, by the way, that I've taken out of it. If you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. Kind of if you don't have a plan, by default, you're part of someone else's plan. He can help you overcome that. I love this saying, you cannot overestimate the unimportance of practically everything. We're back to like getting clear on like what matters. I won't pound through all these, but one of my favorites is, if I didn't already own this, what would I pay to get it back? You ever thought about your teams and your relationships? I mean, it's kind of cool if you just do a closet test. If you go, oh, this old sweater, I don't know. If I lost it, would I buy it back? I mean, it was really cool back in the day, right? You can think about it on things. Think about it on your relationships. Think about it from that standpoint. Your teams, how you're constructed. This is big. And then lastly, protect the asset, and the asset is you guys, right? It's the folks in this room. So with that, again, I thank you. I welcome you to Evolve 2016, and I will turn the time over to Greg McKeown.
Are you feeling good? Are you feeling great? Okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to put your hands together. In fact, no, what I want you to do is I want you to stand up, and I want you to put a huge round of applause for the whole of Trace 3, for everyone that organized this. I mean it really seriously. Really seriously. Thank you to Tyler. Thank you to Chad, to everybody, and to you as well. Thank you. I was thinking about the journey that led me to be able to be with you today. And I don't mean the flight, I mean the 16-year journey. It's been that long, almost to the day, when I was staring at a piece of paper in my hands with all these scribbles. I'd been brainstorming for the last 20 minutes the answer to this question. What would you do if you could do anything? A good question. We should all ask that from time to time. After 20 minutes, I look, and I'm struck not by what is on the piece of paper, but by what is not on the piece of paper. Law school is not on the list, which is a bit of a problem because I was at the time at law school. And I was visiting a friend here in the US, and so then I finally decided after a while I better call my parents. Right. I call the 15-digit number back to England, and my mother answers, fortunately. She listens for a while, and then she says, I think you better talk to Dad. Okay, so he comes on the phone. Now, what are you going to say to your son after all that time, all that money, all that effort? He calls you from halfway around the world. What are you going to say? Really, don't be shy. What are you going to say? What are you going to say? What are you going to say? Yes, you. Did you hear that? She said, what I would say is get your back in the scene, and I think go back to law school. That's the idea, right? Anyone agreeing with this? Snap, if you be agreeing with this. Yeah. Okay. That's a round of applause, in fact. There's nothing like evolving, is there? Nothing like seeing the new future with boldness. So just get back to the old. Well, anyway, talk to my father. He listens, which is not entirely like him. And then finally he says, son, he says, you know what we've always told you. Now, what has he always told me? What do you think? Don't be shy. What has he always told me? Follow your heart, follow your dreams. No, he said go to law school. What's the matter with you? Of course that's what he said. He says, son, you know what we've always told you. And then because, all Englishmen quote Shakespeare over tea and crumpets for breakfast in the morning, he pulls out this line. He says, from Hamlet, to thine own self be true, son. To thine own self. He's never said that to me in his whole life. But now he pulls it out and implies that this is what he's always said. Well, so what happened? So I quit law school, pursue a totally different path. What was on the piece of paper was a question. I want you to write it down. I want you to answer it. I've had 16 years to think about this. Yours is going to have about 16 seconds, but here's the question. Why is it that otherwise successful people and companies don't break through to the next level? Right. When you think about that, why is it that otherwise successful people or companies don't break through to the next level? All right. Oh, we've already got answers. Okay, go. What did you say? Afraid to fail. Why would we be afraid to fail? Disappointment. Okay, so do we have any runners in the room? Any runners? Put your hands up. Yeah, somebody. At the back here. Yes, in the blue dress. Here we go. You should not put your hand up now. Okay, here we go. So if you and I were to have a race, and you won, which you would, and then you won by 50 yards, and we have a second race now, and you get to start the second race 50 yards ahead of me at the beginning. Does it make sense? Does that make sense to everyone? All right, now I want you to give me a percentage. The percentage chance you think you'll beat me in the second race, and nice and loud. I didn't hear. 20%. Even though you have a 50-yard advantage. That is not very confident. That is not what Donald Trump would say. What did he say? You're tired from the first run. Well, that's fair enough. That's interesting. Now, you have a second race. You win. You're 100 yards ahead. What's your percentage chance now? Is it going down or up? I'm very curious. Up. That's something. How high? How high would you go? You've got a 100-yard advantage now at the beginning. What's the chance? Give me a percentage. 100%. That was up. That's a little bit rude. All right, so now you have a 100% chance. And it makes perfect sense, doesn't it? I think it's very logical. You win again, and so it goes. Of course. Of course. Successful people and companies should keep on winning. But what I have found when I looked at the data, when you look at the real results, what you find is that is not what happens. And that is why that question has been so interesting to me, so obsessive for me for so long. And the question is why? Now, I already had one answer, but I want more. Nice and loud, don't be shy. Why? Go. What's this? One more time. They settle. Young lady is running against me and she settles. How does that work? What does that even mean? What does settling mean in that situation? She just wants the first win. She's not hungry enough for the second win. Okay, so one was enough. Okay, more. Why? This is a non-trivial question. This is a question I think that's relevant to every IT leader in every organization. Why doesn't it happen? Why can't you do it? Go. There's no incentive to involve. That was a good answer with this great big evolve behind us, wasn't it? Okay, no incentive to evolve, right? Because she wins number one, number two, she keeps winning. Well, I'm just going to keep playing the same game, but maybe we go to a cross country. She doesn't know I was a cross country Olympian. I wasn't, but she doesn't, could be. And the game changes. Good. Why else? Why? Don't be shy. Why? Why? Go. Complacency was a nice, loud answer from the back. Good. Thank you. Here. They get stuck in their position. Yeah, but why don't they get stuck winning? The race changes. Okay, we're talking about an evolution around us more. Injury. I get fed up of losing and there's an accident that takes place. Okay, so there's an injury. Maybe you wear out. You were saying yourself that you were tired. Let me share an answer that came to me eventually. Hidden in plain sight, I might add. The reason that otherwise successful people or companies don't break through to the next level is success. And this is how I observed it. I was working with Silicon Valley executive teams, and I noticed that when they were focused on the right few things at the right time, they were able to get very focused. They were able to build tremendous momentum, you can imagine. And what did that lead to? Success. Great. Now we have success. What comes with success? What is the natural consequence of success. New options, new opportunities. Well, that sounds like the right problem to have, doesn't it? But it does, in fact, turn out to be a problem. If it leads to what Jim Collins has called the undisciplined pursuit of more. The undisciplined pursuit of more. If you fall into the undisciplined pursuit of more, and I'm exaggerating in order to make the point, but success can become a catalyst for failure. Can you think of any organizations that have fallen into this cycle? Can you think of organizations that fell prey to the undisciplined pursuit of more? If you can, I want you to shout them out. Who can you think of? BlackBerry. I was in Canada one time, and I said at the beginning of a keynote like this, I said, put away your smartphones, and if you're using a BlackBerry, a not-so-smart phone. They did not think that was very funny. Yeah, BlackBerry, right? The market leader, they've got profitability, they had a huge user base, and on and on. And yet somehow they lost the very thing that led to success in the first place. Good, more. Who else can you think of? Who? Blockbuster. Yeah, that's right. Blockbuster. That's rough, isn't it? I joke that there's only two ways of simplifying anything, right? One is failure. Like Blockbuster is a lot simpler than they used to be. And the other is choice. It's leadership. A particular approach to leadership. We'll get to that in a moment. More. Who else can you think of? Who? IBM. That's right, IBM. Can you imagine? So many smart people, so much leading technology, so many patents, so much momentum. More. Kodak. Yep, that's a problem. That'll kill you. More. Yahoo. Oh, that's sensitive, isn't it? Right? That's interesting. Interesting story, right? Can anybody turn it around? Can anyone do it? There's this huge fuss. Marissa comes in. Oh, is she going to be able to do it? I know Marissa. I wanted her to win. But how would you approach this? Do you invest in 100 new things? You get focused on the core? How would you save this situation? What would the right approach be? You can see, can't you? I mean, Yahoo created the consumer web. Absolutely cutting edge. Talk about innovation. How did they lose? It wasn't because they just lost their edge. It wasn't because they got complacent. It wasn't because they were afraid. It was because they were successful. So as Bill Gates put it, he said, success is a very poor teacher because it teaches us that we cannot be wrong. And so the undisciplined pursuit of more is a big challenge. But it's not just a challenge for these big companies. It's also a challenge for the individuals within those companies. I remember working with a leader, very much like you, in a similar position to you, doing amazing, award-winning work. Actually, I'm going to tell you what the work is. Do you remember the Compaq iPad? Who owned a Compaq iPad? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. This was a great product. First touch interface, first color touch interface. This thing was amazing. He was the designer of this product. And talk about the phases we just talked about, right? He got focused on the right idea at the right time. He was able to navigate all the internal politics to be able to make it happen. It became successful. It helped to put Compaq on the map, make it hot brand. Then what happened? Do you remember? What happened to Compaq? Purchased by HP. HP takes them. So he now moves into this new, bigger, as it turns out, more bureaucratic firm. And he's inside of this organization, and he's very determined to be a good team player. Now, you want to do that if you're in technology at all, don't you? If you're in IT, you want to be a good team player, work with everybody. He wants to be part of the new regime and show that he's, someone that you could work with. And so he starts loosely saying yes to everyone and everything without really thinking about it. Now, you tell me what happened. What happens to his stress? What happens to his stress? Goes up. What happens to the quality of his work? Goes down. That is a value gap. It's also a very irritating gap for him, and he finds himself wondering, maybe I should just leave the company altogether. And then somebody gives him some surprising advice. They say, what you need to do is retire, enroll. And that's different than saying quit, stay, and don't tell anybody. That's a different sort of problem, and none of us need any employees in that category. But what did it mean to retire in Raw? It meant, what if he wasn't going to get paid for how hard he worked? What if he was only going to get paid based upon the value he created? And that's it. Now how would he approach it? Suddenly he became far more selective about how he approached his time, his energy, his resources. He thought a lot about this. And he said, you know what happened? He said, honestly, I got my life back. Got my life back. That's a pretty dramatic thing to say, I think. But that was his words to me. I got my life back. Why? Because he had negotiated enough with the internal customers, external customers in his new environment, with his own team, that it meant that he was able to go to the gym every night. He was able to eat dinner with his wife. I mean, it just affected the quality of his life. So he wasn't just absolutely locked on to his mobile technology every single moment. He had some space. And then he said, the same thing happened at work as well. I was able to create space again. And in that space, I found my creative freedom again. And in my creative freedom, I found my ability to break through to my highest point of contribution. What happened at work? By the end of that year, his performance evaluations had gone up. And he ended that year with one of the largest bonuses of his whole career. What did he learn from this? He learned if you say yes to everyone and everything without really thinking about it, then you will not be utilized at your highest point of contribution. That's what he learned. But what about you? I want to do a quick poll of you. All right. For any of these, I want you to snap if they're true for you, right? So have you ever found yourself busy but not productive? Snap for that. All right. Have you ever found yourself stretched too thin at work or at home? Snap for that. Right. Have you ever found your day hijacked by somebody else's agenda? Snap for that. Yes, I got somebody dancing over here to this one. Have you ever said yes just to please? Or to appease? Or just to avoid trouble? Right. So if you snap to any of the above, a bigger question comes your way. The question is why? Why? So, visually, I don't know if you're seeing this. Are you seeing this? There we go. Next one. Here we go. Visually, as the CEO of your own life, right, as the CEO of your own life, you have the same challenge that all CEOs face, and that is finite resources, infinite numbers of ways of allocating those resources, right? Finite resources, infinite number of ways of allocating them. Does it make sense? Right. This is the fundamental problem of pretty much every other problem, because it's always about a challenge of resources. If you had unlimited resources, you could do everything. Right. So the question is, now this is trickier. Why, as the CEO of your own life, are you allocating resources in such a way that you end up being stretched too thin at work or at home? Why? Don't be shy. Why? Why is that? Why do you do that? What was that? Pay the bills. What does that mean? You got responsibilities, so therefore you have to what? You have to do it all. I have to do it all. If I do it all, then I get to pay my bills. Okay. But I've got responsibilities to a lot of people, that's why. Okay, more. More. Why? What's that? Louder. You don't like to say no. Okay, I'm coming down there. Why don't you like to say no? Okay, I'm coming back. Do we have a microphone? Because you're a people pleaser. That was very bold of you to admit that in front of hundreds of people. Snap if you also self-identify as a people pleaser. Of course you are. You're in a services group. I mean, my heavens, of course. Yes, that's it. We hate to say, well, why do you hate to say no? You're a people pleaser, but what does it do for you? What does saying yes do for you? Did you hear that? I just love this. It makes me feel valuable, and it makes me feel like they like me. That's right. Is this true? I mean, is he exaggerating? Is he exaggerating? Have you not been rewarded for saying yes in the moment? Who has been rewarded for saying yes in the moment? Of course you have. Has anyone here been punished for saying no in the moment? Yeah, people are like, yes, and then they're like, well, actually, I've never really said no. It's like an entirely hypothetical question. Well, like novices at no. But nevertheless, I think there's something to this, that culturally, we are rewarded for saying yes and punished for saying no. We're rewarded for bad behavior and punished for good behavior. So that's a big challenge. In fact, this goes to the very point I wish to make in setting the context for our conversation, is that there is a cultural norm of our times that celebrates what I am calling non-essentialism. It celebrates it. It celebrates the glorification of the busy. Do I exaggerate? Is there a glorification of the busy? Yes. How do you know? How do you know? You see it every day. How do you see it every day? You see it how busy families are. What else? Yeah, well, families, it's crazy. I've got 4 children. It's just to watch the emails my wife receives. It really should come to me as well, but you know how it goes sometimes. It's just unbelievable. It's just they've got to, I wish it wasn't being recorded right now, but you know what I mean. We're going to have a flower day. That was a good idea the first day they did, but then every single year you have a flower day now for every single teacher. And so it goes, one good idea on top of another, on top of another. Who wants to be the person who says, we're not going to do a flower day? I am not giving a flower to the teacher. That's just terrible. You don't want to be that guy. And so it gets more and more complex all the time. Is it an exaggeration to say that culturally we are in the undisciplined pursuit of more? That is a cultural norm of our times? I think that's not an exaggeration. I was talking to somebody recently. I said, how are you? And she said, I am so busy. You heard that before? Yeah. And she's smiling. She adds this. She says, you know what? I'm so busy, Greg. I've slept on average 4 hours a night for the last 2 weeks. Yeah. And she's smiling. Why is she smiling? What does she have to smile about? I tell you what I think she has to smile about is that she's boasting. This is a backdoor brag. She's saying, Greg, I hate to break it to you, I'm a little more important than you. I know you get like your proper all your 8 hours. I know mortals like you can do that, but me, I'm amazingly important. So of course I have to sleep 4 hours. Is this not true what I'm describing? Does this not describe something familiar? And it's funny about this whole thing about the undisciplined pursuit of more because we'd never say, this employee over here, they're so great. I just love the way they're just drunk all the time. It's marvelous the way they turn up that way. I love the kinds of decisions they make when they're just off their rocker. No, we would never say that. And yet, maybe we would celebrate and glorify the busy with a different phrase. Well, they are great. They pulled an all-nighter on that one. They got that done. They made that happen. And yet, if you get 4 hours of sleep, physiologically, physically, and in every other way, it is the same as being drunk. Seriously. Really. What does it do to the executive function of your brain? What kind of decisions are you making? How well are you going to discern? I am arguing that we are in a busyness bubble where there's this absolute irrational exuberance over more and more and more. Okay, so here's the alternative. The antidote to the undisciplined pursuit of more is the disciplined pursuit of less but better. The disciplined pursuit of less but better. Does it make sense? Less but better. The idea is you could do very, very many things averagely well, or a few things superbly well. And that is a fundamental trade-off that you are faced with every single day. You can pretend otherwise because you want to keep everybody happy, you want to be a people pleaser. You can pretend that way. You can say, I'm just being helpful to all of my internal customers. They want everything. And so, of course, I'm just trying to be helpful. I remember I remember I started first 3 years after I quit law school. I was working with an IT, with a CIO directly with it. And I remember we were trying to put together a strategic plan of where we were going to spend the resources to be able to deliver the highest value, return on investment for the whole organization. I remember talking to one of my internal customers. And I came to him and said, listen, we just want the top 5 projects that we can deliver for you. Have you had this kind of conversation? And they came back to me with 17. You had that kind of conversation? And I said, no, really, it's 5. And they went away, they had a whole discussion, and they came back and they said, okay, we've done it. These are the 16. I didn't know what it was about that one project that suddenly they were willing to eliminate, but you can see the problem, can't you? The idea you can have it all, you can be it all, you just shove it all in. It's, I think, a complete nonsense. And we can use the metaphor for a moment. I just want you to think for a moment of your closet. Yes. Are you proud of your closet? If we had a picture of your closet right now, what would it look like? I know what it looks like. You never look after it. You never organize it. You never prioritize. You never get rid of anything. And yet somehow it is pristinely, beautifully organized with only the things you love to wear and wear often. Yes? No. Of course not. What happens? You look at your closet and finally you think, if only I had a larger closet, that would solve the problem. If I could just have a larger closet, that would be the issue. And then you get a larger closet and you find out that that is not the problem. You find out there's something else. Have you ever got to that point where you go, okay, yes, I'm going to be an essentialist about this. I'm going to select just the things I want. And then you go to take an item off the shelf. And you take it and you're looking at this item and you say to yourself, have you ever noticed something magical happens in that moment, mysterious, as you're looking at it? And you think, well, I could wear it again sometime. It might fit me again in the future. Might come back into fashion in the future. And after all, maybe Aunt Mildred gave it to me, so I don't know. I don't know. And what happens? You tell me, what happens? Goes right back on the hanger, right back on the shelf, right? And you eliminate nothing from the list. Okay, this is the undisciplined pursuit of more, right? And the reason is because you're using such a massively broad criteria to make your decisions. Now, we're not talking about closets. We're talking about an approach to resource allocation that is relevant to every CIO and technology team everywhere. We're talking about a very particular approach. I'm going to suggest that there are 3 ways that you can apply essentialism to your work. And I want to go through which each of these things mean. 1, explore. 2, eliminate. 3, execute. Okay, what does it mean? The first item, to explore, means this, that a non-essentialist will just tend to react to everything that comes their way. Right? They treat everything as if it's essential. The non-essentialist believes that everything is a priority. In fact, while we're just on this for a moment, do you know the history of the word priority? Does anybody know? Put your hands up if you know the answer to this. All right, so everybody is going to learn something right now. That's great. I love this insight when I was researching the book. Priority came to the English language in the 1400s. Now, what did it mean? What did it mean? Give me the obvious. What did it mean? One thing. Yeah, from the same root word as prior. The prior thing. The very first thing. I go to pains to emphasize that because literally for the next 500 years, right, for half a millennium, nobody in the English-speaking world thought to pluralize that term. Yeah, sink in for a moment. It was only in reaction to the industrial age that somebody thought of the term priorities. Can you have very, very many first, before all other things? This is just a nonsense, isn't it? A sort of form of madness. And yet, have you not been to a meeting yourself when somebody said with no sense of irony at all, here are my 10 priorities? And they're all equally important? And you must do them all first? I mean, it's just, there's a certain craziness in the culture And so to do what I'm describing means to be very different than the norms of our times. It means to think very differently, to operate as an essentialist. Explore means to create space on your calendar, space, to answer the simple question, what is essential? That's it. Now, there's very in-depth ways that we do this. When we work inside of organizations and really help teams of people work on this, and whole organizations to apply essentialism, we go through, a 2-day workshop really helping people to figure out what we call the grid, the key things they need to deliver, why those are essential, and why the other things need to be put on a back burner for now, which things need to be eliminated. We do a whole process, but I want to give you a small, quick tip, quick fix for you forever. Now, here's what you do. Every single day, you make a list of the top 6 most valuable things as you can identify them, right? You don't overthink it, but you just identify. And you write them down. 6 things, and you put them in priority order. My experience with this is it takes somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes a day. You've got to create that space. And then priority order, got it, right? So you got the 6 things, priority order. Now, you cross off the bottom 5. You keep the list, but psychologically at least you cross them off. And you say, look, I'm just going to get that thing done. Because based on the power laws, it is often true that the number 1 item on that list will be significantly more valuable than number 2, and possibly even more valuable than the remaining 5. So you start with the top thing, you really get that done, and then you move on to number 2 and number 3, and you do it every single day. The days I do this, it's like my day expands. Suddenly I can feel a sense of control, and I'm going forward. Now, of course, things come my way. Of course, there are surprises. But I can keep coming back to that list again and again. And the days I don't, I am just a function of other people's agenda. Email becomes my prioritization mechanism. Do you know what I mean? Ever had email become the mechanism you look to? Okay, what do I do next? Email. And we've got to be very careful, because so often when we're checking email, we're checking somebody else's agenda. And we're not even necessarily identifying the most important things that our customers want from us. Just the latest thing, just the most reactive thing. So the first thing is to explore by creating this space, make the list of 6. Number 2 is to eliminate. Eliminate the non-essentials. That's the idea. As gracefully as possible, with as great a skill and as compassion as you can muster. But nevertheless, to learn to eliminate those things that are not going to utilize your resources, your energies at your highest point of contribution. Okay, so with eliminate, there's a great story. Now, everybody knows Steve Jobs was great at saying no, right? Everybody gets that. We know that. That's done. It's overdone. But what about somebody who said no to Steve Jobs, lived to tell the tale, and earned $100,000 for doing it? That's an interesting story. And so this is the story when Steve Jobs had left Apple. He's launching next, and he needs a great new logo, and he goes to the top logoist of the Times, Paul Rand, and he says, look, I want you to create this. And then he explained how he wanted him to do it. You're going to come up with X number of options, bring them to me, I'll evaluate them, I'll tell you what I like, what I don't, and then you're going to come and give me the next set, and so on. He explains how the process will work. And Rand responds, listens, and he responds, he says, no. He says, I will solve your problem for you completely, and you will pay me. That's how this works. So Steve thinks about this for a moment, a little chagrined, and he says, okay, we'll try that then. Rand brings him what Steve later describes as a jewel of a logo. This logo completely solves the problem, as promised. And even more important, I think, than that, is what Steve said about Rand afterwards. He said, this guy, he was the ultimate professional. He was the ultimate professional. Because he had thought through the customer value exchange more deeply than I had. That's what made him not just an order taker, but a trusted advisor, a strategic advisor, someone who I really relied upon. Is that not equivalent, relevant to you in the business right now? That you have to become more than an order taker, especially in a non-essentialism era where everyone just expects everything from technology, no matter what. They have no sense of so many of the factors that you're grappling with. So it's not enough to simply be a very helpful, people-pleasing order taker. You have to become more valuable than that. You have to move up the value exchange. And that means you have to think through more deeply what you should be delivering. So that then when the conversations come and they say, hey, can you solve this problem? Can you do this? You say, well, I'm happy to do those things. But let me tell you what I think the very best use of me is. And let me tell you what I think will be the very best return on investment for you. Suddenly, they're listening. Suddenly you've got to do the thinking. That's why you've got to explore first. But the exploration and the clarity you achieve internally will allow you to navigate the external social pressures that come constantly in your working life. This is eliminate. And the third idea, the third way to apply essentialism is execution. But I mean by this a very specific kind of execution. There's one form of execution. Have you ever been on a project where execution was a last-minute, all-nighter, force this thing in, make it happen, kill it project? Yes? Hypothetically, I don't mean where you are right now, I just mean. So, this is exactly the situation that a lot of people find themselves in. But the essentialist approaches it differently. The key is how to make execution as effortless as possible. And here's what I want to emphasize to you today is that I've been talking about the disciplined pursuit of less, right? And often we get a very wrong-headed idea about discipline, as if discipline is something one can psych themselves into. I will discipline myself today. This year I will discipline myself with this new diet. I will discipline myself, right? You know what I'm saying? And then it doesn't really work so well. And the reason is because all the data shows that on a given day, every one of us in this room has a certain amount of discipline, and that's what we've got. Like a bucket of discipline. And I don't know if it's good news or bad news, what is in fact the case is that tomorrow you're going to have about the same amount of discipline again. And there's almost nothing you can do to increase it from day to day. Over a long period of time, you can increase it through a few things in incremental ways. But pretty much you have what you have. So the big question when it comes to executing on the things that matter most is not how disciplined you'll be, it's how you use the available discipline you have. And what I'm arguing to you, what I'm putting the case to you for, is that you need to use that discipline to build a system or a routine that makes execution as effortless as possible. So, for example, let's use Michael Phelps as an example, right? I was in China not long ago. I was in Beijing. I went to the Cube. You remember the blue cube where he did his extraordinary performance. And I was watching. Actually, I was just in there. There was nobody in there, in fact. I was just looking and remembering. And I thought to myself, how is it that he made the execution of 8 gold medals, this extraordinary feat of human performance, look so effortless? How did he do that? I mean, we know, of course, there was training, but when I went and did the research, what I found is that his coach, Bob Bowman, had started a whole practice of effortless execution 10 years previously. How did he approach it? Well, first of all, he had a scheduled routine that included the following. He would arrive 2 hours before the race. So in Beijing, he was there 2 hours before the race, just like normal. He goes into the pool, he does 800 backstroke, it is 500 freestyle, and so on, right? He just goes through exactly the same routine. Gets out, he's already in swim shorts, but he puts on his performance shorts right before the Olympics. And then he sits down on the massage bench, never lies down, always just sits. From 45 minutes to the time of the race, he and his coach will never speak a word to each other. Total silence. He has music in from about 20 minutes to the race. Same music. When he takes the earbuds out before the race, it's always one and then the other, always the same. When he goes up to stand to take off, he dries off the whatever, I can't think of the name of it. He dries it off, always gets on the left side, not the right side. Always flaps his arms in precisely the same way. This is unbelievable level of routine. He is using his routine to his great advantage. So on the day, he's not using any of his discipline up, trying to think what to do next and where they should be and where are his goggles and where's the thing. He's got a routine that does all of that. He's able to maintain all of his energy to to do the race itself. Now, that's just the physical routine. He also has had a mental routine for some 10 years. Every morning and every night, his coach taught him and had him visualize. He called it put in the videotape. He had to visualize in slow motion absolutely every stroke of the perfect race. Every morning, every night, 10 years, you do the math. By the point that he stood ready to go at the first race of the Olympics, he has prepared for this moment thousands of times. He is not, I've got to force myself, I've got to go crazy. He's just playing the routine that they have built and have perfected all these years. Now, that's a very extreme example for where we are ourselves in our lives. But can we not use the same kind of designful approach to your routines to make sure that you're not using up your precious time, energy, discipline, supply to make routine decisions? And so I put to you this suggestion that you say, okay, at least like the first hour of my day, I am going to design in intricate detail. And by that, I don't mean like, okay, I get up and I spend 10 minutes doing this and 30 minutes doing that. I mean almost breath by breath. What is the very first thing you do? And if it's checking your phone, I just warn you about that, right? These people that are on that phone, they have not come together in a room next door to collude together to make sure you're going to be utilized at your highest point of contribution today. We can be sure of that. So you want to be very careful about instantly reacting to that. So get the phone out. Oh, yes, so you use it for your alarm clock. So what? Get an alarm clock. It's fine. Get it out of there. Instead, you look at the grid or some sense of prioritization. If you need use some other tool already, that's fine. That's what I do the very first thing. I look at the grid. It's so centering for me. It's a really important sense of why I'm doing what I'm doing, what I'm doing, and how I'm doing it. In fact, that's a little tip. Have you ever gone through a prioritization process where somebody says, okay, we've got to have a vision statement. And then somebody said, well, we got to have a vision statement, we don't have a mission statement. We got to do a mission statement, we have to have value statements. And then you spend the next 3 weeks trying to work out what on earth the difference is between a vision statement, a value statement, and a mission statement. Snap if this has been true for you. Yes, you know what I'm talking about. The endless wordsmithing that follows is not the most productive activity I've ever been involved with. So here's a very simple idea for you. And I'd apply it to you before your organization. I think the fastest way to apply essentialism to an organization is just to start living it, aspiring to it ourselves. And so here's what I would recommend. You just think about it this way. The vision is the why. Why? Why are you doing what you're doing? The vision is the why. The mission is the what. What do you do? What are those key things that you do? And the strategy is the how. How are you planning to do it? That's it. Why, what, how. That's the vision, the mission, and the strategy. I think that's a very helpful way to think about, creating your grid, your sense of direction for your life personally and professionally. Look, this is the idea. Explore, eliminate, and execute. And if you can do this, I think you have a reasonable chance to be able to actually apply essentialism and gain the advantages that we've gained. I want to pause for a moment. As you're looking at this, as you're hearing all this, I want you to tell me, what's your reaction? I'll take anything. I don't mind at all. Do you have a reaction of, yes, that's great, I'm going to do it? Do you have a reaction of, that is not very realistic for me? What is your reaction? What's your real reaction as you're hearing all this? Don't be shy. Tell me what it is. Yes, go, nice and loud. Okay, you think it's a wonderful way to organize your life and set your goals. Is that what you said? Yes, all right. You can stay. You're a keeper. More. What's that? And you're buying my book now. Way to set an example. More. What's your reaction to all of this? What's your reaction? Put your hand up so I can hit. You need a Sherpa? Is that what you said? We all need a Sherpa. I mean, that is generally true. Go. You need a therapist. Well, that's very curious. I'm coming down again. All right, why do you need a therapist? I mean, that's a very personal question, isn't it? I didn't expect this morning that I was going to ask anybody that question in this keynote. It's you, yes? You need a therapist. Why? What does that mean? Why do you need a therapist? We all need a therapist, by the way. But it's overwhelming. What's overwhelming? Life. You need a therapist because life is overwhelming. Snap if you agree with this. That's right. What's overwhelming? What does that mean? Is this overwhelming or something else overwhelming? Somebody said, do I want to take this out into the hallway? No, this is everybody. Does anybody want to know more about this conversation? Snap if you want to continue. That's right, that's right. This is not just us. What? Is it this that's overwhelming? Or is it just all of those demands that's overwhelming for you? All the demands. Do you relate to this? It's a bit insane, isn't it? It is, it's insane. Of course it's insane. This is a bubble that's going to burst one day. And everyone's going to go, oh my goodness, can you remember what that was like? What were they like in those times? They were all just so crazy. They didn't sleep. They just were checking their phones 24/7. I mean, I was at an event. I was just watching the event, listening to the event, 50 of us, to the CEO of a major corporation. Everybody knows the corporation. I bet everybody here knows the CEO. And she says at one point, she says, well, listen, I'll just tell you what. She says, I sleep with my phone. My phone is right there by my head. She said, if I get an email at 3 o'clock, I just respond by 3:05. And we're all like, no, you didn't just say that. That's terrible. We know that some people do it, but we didn't know you'd just say it. And then somebody asked this question. We said, yes, but what about everyone in your organization? Doesn't that set like a bad standard? Doesn't that set a bad example? And she says, oh, no. That's what everybody's like at our company. We just bleed blue. And we're like, we knew that some people believed that, but we didn't know anyone was saying it. And then she said this as if it wasn't bad enough. She said, and if I send an email to my EA at 4 a.m., she responds by 4:05. And then she said, isn't that right? And she points to her EA, who's at the back of the room, and all 50 of us, heads turn. Oh my goodness, this is terrible. And what's she going to say in front of all these people and her boss and all of this? Yes, that's right. It's crazy though. But eventually it will be seen for the madness it is, because it's not sustainable. You can't really live this way. We've just been sold a bill of goods. It's just madness, really, honest to goodness. That's what it is. I mean, do you remember what the first bubble was? What's the first bubble? First bubble on record, does anybody know? Testing you now. Tulips! You get 5 points for Gryffindor. That is correct. At the height of the tulip bubble, it cost for a single tulip bulb 10 times the annual worker's salary. For one bulb. I mean, those people were nuts, weren't they? I mean, these are crazy people. Mad people. But don't you see, in all bubbles, in hindsight, it's obvious. In hindsight, it's always obvious. We shouldn't have been buying a house like that. Everybody knew that afterwards, and certainly not 5 of them. Everybody knows it afterwards, but in the time of irrational exuberance, where people's behavior is everyone's just looking at everyone, that's what they're doing, I guess I'll do that. And this is exactly what's happening with non-essentialism. We have been conned. It is a bill of goods. You cannot just have it all if you're trying to shove it all in. So what do? You've got to become so much more selective. Now, we talked about the closet before. I never quite finished that, didn't close the loop on it. Instead of asking the world's broadest question, which is, could I ever possibly sometime in the future maybe wear this? That's like the largest criteria that's known to men. That's like, of course the answer is, yeah, of course. So maybe you could say, like, do I really like it? That would, like, reduce it significantly, wouldn't it? No. What if you said, do I love it? Well, now you're down to, that's a standard. No, there's more. Anyone seen it? It's the book, Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. I think it's a terrific essentialist-style book. She asks this question, does it spark joy? Does it spark joy? You hold each item up, does it spark joy? I tell you what happens when you do that, like I did. Well, first of all, my wife's closet, I don't know, like we were left with like a third of what was there before. Really, that's true. And she wasn't like pack-wrapped before. Same happened to me. It was amazing. I was like, essentialist and all that, but I had like half the stuff afterwards. But here's the cool thing. You just have stuff. that sparks joy. So that's cool because that's all you want. You don't want all the nonsense. Now, I'm not saying necessarily, I think it might be a little odd if you suddenly go back to the executive team that you're on and you simply say, listen, next time you ask me, I'm just going to ask you, does that tech project spark joy for you? I went to this thing, this guy said, I must ask it. It's his fault, but I'm asking. Now, that's not the idea, but I'll give you one that is closer. No more yes. No more yes. It's either hell yeah or no. You put that back to them. I'm not saying you start becoming the no person. This is not going to win for you. That's not going to work. But there's no reason whatsoever that you, as a trusted advisor, as arguably the smartest person on the team, certainly on the cutting edge, bleeding edge sometimes, right? You know stuff. You have something to offer. Why can't you put that question to them? Look, is this just, hey, I really like this? Or is this like a hell yes project? A definitive, I really want this. I think this will move the needle project. Because I just really want to make sure I'm investing in the things that help you break through to the next level. Anyone here can say that, I think, to almost any leader and have a reasonable conversation. And not an easy one. We haven't, especially if we're not used to having those conversations, but this is what we can do. More reactions to this before we move on. You find yourself, is this therapy over here? That was helpful. This is buying the book. That's also helpful. What else? What's your reaction? You're conflicted. Hypothetically, you're conflicted. What is conflicted? You look at this, tell us more. Everything's possible with technology. I'm going to kind of repeat so everyone can hear. In a scenario where everything's possible with technology, therefore what? Okay. We do things because we can, not because they're essential to our being. So that's the tension. We can do all this stuff. They're not absolutely essential, but we can do them. Yeah. People ask the question, can you do? And you say, yes, I can. Should I do? I think the difference between the average or good engineer or tech leader and a really great one is the difference between can I and should I. Can I or should we? You've got to make this shift in conversation because here's the thing. I mean, the reason you're in the room is because you're capable. And so let me introduce, I think, a challenge that comes with that. It's the curse of capability. Right? The curse of capability is that you can do stuff. And people ask you these specific questions, and suppose as an engineer, you're answering a very honest question. Can you do this, Wes? I think we can do that. But it's a very different question. What's the total cost of ownership? We know that term, but there's a different way of thinking about it. Every project you take on, what's the total cost of ownership? Yeah, we can do it, but what's the cost? What is the trade-off? That's the thing, you see, because a non-essentialist believes there are no trade-offs. You can just do it all, have it all, stuff it all in, no problem. What does that produce? Really exhausted executives. Also, projects that are delivered when? Late, on budget, over budget. Yeah, there's a term that I think you need to bring into your conversations, both yourself, in your teams, but also them with the broader business. And that is the planning fallacy. The planning fallacy is the name for a brain heuristic that's so strong that I'm about to teach it to you, and it still will make almost no difference at all. Isn't that a little bit depressing? The planning fallacy is that humans routinely, by routinely I mean almost all the time, underestimate the time and resources a thing will take to do. And so it is that you have 10 minutes to go from point A to point B for a meeting, but you're on your email. And you say to yourself, this time, 5 minutes. You've made that trip 20 times before. You know it takes 10 minutes, but you still, in that moment, allow yourself to believe, I'll do that in 5 minutes. It'll be fine. Oh, we'll get there. I'll race really quickly. We'll sort it out. We'll get it. And, of course, it doesn't. It takes 10 minutes. You're late. And that's what happens. Multiply that. Writ large, you have projects. Well, you tell me. I mean, I don't want to be lecturing you. Why don't you tell me? I want you to make a big list in your head right now, mental list of all projects you have ever taken on, right? That's big, that was mind-bending. All that list. And now I want you to divide it, segment it into the list this way. I want a list of all the projects that took longer or cost more than you originally thought. And then on this side, I want all the projects that took less time and less money than you originally thought. You done that? What's the ratio? 0 to 100, somebody said here. Somebody else, I'm sure there's somebody else here, very generous, might say 10 to 90. That's the planning fallacy. And that's the planning fallacy as it equates to really smart people who really think about stuff. Engineers, no less. Tech people, we think about this stuff. And yet, amazingly, we're still incredibly bad at actually owning this. And that's why we say yes to 20 different things. We just think, if I can shove it all in, I can have it all. Well, there's a lot more conversation than we could have about this, but let me just share this idea. Because sometimes when I'm done with Essentialism keynote like this, someone will say, I really liked what you said, there's just one more thing I need to think about. And then I think, I'm not sure you fully understood what it was I was fully trying to say. Because essentialism is not one more thing. It's a different way of doing everything. It's a different way of thinking. Yes, it's a mindset shift. And so I want you to shift the major and the minor of your leadership. I want you to shift it from a non-essentialist at the core who every so often thinks about essentialism to someone who at the core is an essentialist. There's a sort of identity shift. I'm going to constantly explore, eliminate, and execute, and make that as effortless as possible. And if you'll do that over time, what you'll find is that you will become more and more of an essentialist and only occasionally be pulled into a million different directions. It can be done. It's not enough. A keynote isn't enough. It's more than that that's required. But I started this conversation today talking about someone, me, who almost became a barrister in England. And I want to share the story of someone who actually did become a barrister. But I want to do that with some context in mind. His family had an emergency in South Africa. So he leaves England and he goes to South Africa. And while he's there, he's taking a train ride, first-class tickets bought, and he's on this train ride and he gets kicked off. It's the middle of apartheid. And he's kicked off because he's Indian and he's not allowed to be in first class. They physically take him and throw him right off the train. And he has this key moment of like, okay, this cannot stand. I have to fight this. This is essential. And he fights it. And he ends up staying in South Africa for some 23 years. Takes on the South African government. Takes a long time. Planning fallacy. And he wins. He becomes successful. Yes? Successful. He has learned about civil disobedience. He's learned how to win. He becomes successful. He goes back to India, and people meet him literally at the train station. Having read about his successful adventures and pursuits with the government, they say, we need you to run for political office here in India. He's got new options and opportunities, just like we've been talking about. What does he do? Does he get pulled into the exuberance, maybe even irrational exuberance of the moment, get pulled along? I think a lesser leader, a non-essentialist, would have said yes to that. Good option? Why not? He says no. He says, I do not know India, and I do not know what is essential here. And I have to go and find out who she is and how it works. And he spends 1 year listening to India, trying to understand what the key variables are, what the key levers are, to why it is that so many Indians can be controlled by so few British. And he finds the answer eventually in this infinitesimally small but incredibly important item, salt. Because the British controlled the production of salt, they controlled the production of the food chain and therefore keep the people easily under their control. And that's when the idea spawned to him to begin a walk across India to the beaches. They became known as the Salt Marches. And he went to India and made salt on the beaches in a demonstration of civil disobedience, and 600,000 people follow him. The whole world, and certainly Great Britain, pays attention. Who is this little man? And why are they so interested in what he has to say? And then he begins what I can only describe as essentialist experiments that include, for example, when his grandson is beaten up in South Africa, once for being too white, and again differently a different time for being too black. Like that might make you cross. They send him to be with his grandfather, ship him off. And his grandfather, Gandhi here, we're talking about Gandhi in India, and he's got the president, prime minister, everybody wants a piece of him. He's got 1,000 things. If he was just a people pleaser, what would he have become? He schedules his life in such a way he spends 1 hour a day for over a year, according to his grandson Aaron, when I talked to him, listening to his grandson. Can you imagine the discipline, the routine he had to design to make that possible? And then through a series of essentialist experiments that included, like fasting, that's like the ultimate essentialist experiment, meditation, prayer, he brought the largest empire the world has ever known to its knees. Left his friends, did it with grace. When he died, the U.S. Secretary of State, General George C. Marshall, said of him, "Here is a man who has shown simplicity can be more powerful than empires." And Einstein said of him, "Generations to come will scarce believe that such a one as this, ever in flesh and blood, walked upon this earth." We don't have to be Gandhi, but we can still take advantage of essentialist experiments. Now, we know what it is to try something new. But what about a reverse pilot, where we try not doing something and see what the effect is? Let me suggest the tale, as I conclude, of 2 keynote participants, right? You. The first is this, and it looks awfully like the Gartner hype cycle, because that's really what it is. You come to an event, we have a conversation, hopefully it's a good conversation, there's hype, right? It's great, exciting. And then you leave the conference, reality sets in, and somebody on your team here is here with you as well, and they talk about, yeah, we really ought to be more essentialist about this. And you sort of try and relaunch the effort, and then finally it goes the way of all such thinking and dies. Tell me if you can relate to this kind of a keynote experience. Snap if this is true for you, yes. That's one story. I think that's the most obvious story, most likely story. But there's another story that can be written, and I have seen that now enough to know it really can be done. And that is that you walk away and you just say, well, I'm just going to have a conversation with my team. You know, maybe you say, and I don't mind if it sounds like I'm pitching, I don't care, that's a risk I'm willing to take. You say, we're all going to read Essentialism together. It's a small win. And then you say, look, maybe we should really figure this out. We're going to do like a workshop. We're going to actually implement these ideas and try to really see if we can get really clear, not sort of clear, but really clear about what's really important for 2016. And then you start building momentum and building momentum. In this way, I have seen organizations go from a little conversation like this to literally transform the culture of their organizations. And the impact of it is that they break through to the next level. I just got off the phone from a CEO, in fact, who implemented Essentialism in exactly the way we're describing. They have increased growth in their company from 3% per year, same 3% for 10 years previous, to 9% in the last 9 months. Because it really works. I mean, who can doubt it? Life for you is fast and full of opportunity, and the complication is that sometimes we think we have to do it all. And my view is that the implication of that is that you can end up just making a millimeter progress in a million directions, plateauing your progress, in fact. My position is that you can make a different choice, that you can choose to lead as an essentialist, eliminate what's not essential, do the things that really move the needle, and as a result of that, you can seriously break through to the next level, personally, professionally, and lead your organizations to do the same. And thank you for having me.